You know, when I thought I was gonna come back to this series, I thought it'd be on a lot more of a impactful note about doing what needs to be done for the betterment of mankind, whether it's standing up to corrupt businesses like YouTube or trying to address a lot of the stuff like the whole entire climate against those that really are trying to get out of the poverty line. You know, a lot of stuff where your opinion should really matter most. And then a lot of people wanted to get on their whole we need to not be so critical bandwagon, and critics are basically tearing down stuff because they're unable to follow the vision of what the people stated and did to an obscene degree of whatever. So now I have to make a Nomadic Opinions video about how critics are not supposed to be, you know, the golden standard about being good or bad. Hello, my lovely little nomads, part of you strangers everywhere across the internet. My name is V, and welcome back to Nomadic Opinions, the series where I try to take a very adult approach to some very real topics. But this time it's not really a real topic, it's just of a profession at, I guess, a small impasse about what it means to be a critic in the eyes of today's content creators or showrunners or filmmakers, what have you. Now, it's no secret, over the years I've probably covered a lot of media. I've covered animation stuff, I've covered different live action pieces, I've covered machinimas, I've covered a lot of different things, even a musical and a play that has since been taken down because that was not my best anything, because it wasn't even my script. Oh boy, those are some dark days. But I still at least got enough feedback from a lot of people involved in certain productions. Like, I was hit up by a few people on Netflix about certain shows they were in, about how they did feel about the review, about me trying to give stuff some fair shakes and whatnot, where I'm still trying to work on my video for The Get Down that's been taking years to work on, and the show's been canceled ever since, so thanks, Netflix. I've looked into a few different things to where, I've looked into a couple of things to where game developers gave me the okay to look into their games, and even a few different showrunners have told me that they want me to continue looking at their stuff because I did give it enough of a fair shake when I talked about it, when I sat down with them to understand the process. And it's not as if I'm unfair, because there are also fellow critics I look up to, like the Cinema Snob or Familiar Faces CR and Brandon Tenold. A lot of different individuals I could list off and probably will never list off have given off the credence about critiquing is always sent on the whole privilege of it's just your opinion and it's not to try and be too mean to the creator. If we're going to be critical, it's because we want better, not because we want worse. And that's always the big push in, because you can't just go into critiques for stuff where if it's going to be bad, you just go in with the worst intentions. It's always best to try and go into it where even if you're not a fan of it, you need to address why it's bad the way that you need it to be addressed as bad. But now that I've gotten the basics out of the way about why I'm stating this, allow me to get into even more in-depth about why this was brought up, because firstly is stuff of trying to do a lot of request reviews for individuals and why certain times it's not the best thing to do. I can't speak for any other content creator that has been an internet reviewer, but I can state for myself that one of the reviews I did recently that was a request was me looking at God School, a very prevalent production on YouTube that's also got IMDb pages, has a lot of big fan base followings and the millions for viewerships, and many people trying to state that it's one of the golden standards for it's good for kids, but also can be accessible by teenagers. It's probably one of the best things to come out for Greek mythology since the Percy Jackson books, and will probably be persisting for a long time because there's no other media that can match up with this. And when it was requested to me by one of my god kids, I was trying to go into it with a pretty good mindset going in at first, where me and the missus did sit down. We watched the first episode together, and then I watched the second and third by myself, and I can't really see why, but I was already requested to where my god kids did pay me for the service. But going into that, I didn't hide just how bad of the writing was, because I want people to understand why, but I don't think they get why. In circumstances of covering Greek mythology, there is a certain tone and cadence problem I feel like people take advantage of to try and take civil liberties. Like, God School has it to where Kronos is the head of all of Olympus, and all of the gods are there in high school being taught by Gaia, who is submissive, very much closed in on herself to where she's almost close to a nervous breakdown, and kowtowing to someone where in most iterations, if not every iteration, is viewed as a monster because he tortured and ate his kids, he made the whole world suffer because of a prophecy, and abused his own mother, which is Gaia, by shoving in monsters that were born from Gaia, as well as abusing other figures in his life for world conquest. Where a lot of the jokes they try to do, like Kronos doing the throwaway line of, I could just eat you up, that doesn't sit well because it's also trying to take a jab of saying, hey, let's make light of domestic abuse. Or the stuff of, if Zeus wants to make an impression on a woman, he should shapeshift, which is making light of sexual assault themes because Zeus has used his libido to assault and take advantage of women to have his children, which has led to the horrifying repercussions of those offsprings. I'm trying to English as best I can, guys, but it's been a long day. And having someone that has lived through those circumstances and more is not the best of a request thing to where it can damper your review if you're not able to approach it in a more subtle tone other than just trying to be upfront and very brash and apparent with it. And that can pretty much ruin your standings if you don't really know how else to approach stuff. And yeah, that's just that on that front. I could say the stuff of how I approach things with, I would say Subverse would be the same category, but honestly, I feel as if I gave it a chance. I tried to go into it as best as I could. I played the game as much as I could on one of my friends' accounts because I didn't want to use it. I think I stated that in the review. And all I can say is that I stand by what I said, which is that the story is lackluster. How they wrote the characters doesn't make me feel anything except cringe. And the gameplay is leaving less than what they were expecting for desirability. If the sex options are all people are looking for, you can find it on an adult website somewhere. I'm just saying, it's cheaper than playing the game. And I feel like Studio Foul knew that, so we're gonna move on from that front to get into the crux about why this video was being made in the first place. And that is how people want to try and act as if when your stuff is being critiqued, that your vision is clear to everyone but yourself because you demand people see it that way. Not that your work speaks for itself, but you're demanding people see it that way rather than just they analyze it, they go through with it because you left a lot of good breadcrumbs, And because you didn't, you're now just trying to take it out on others, saying they didn't get what you were doing because they didn't get your quote-unquote masterclass level of writing. I'm not going to get into the person or production in question that try to state all this, but all I'm going to say is I'm not ashamed about what I said about their production, but I am upset with myself about how I said it, because 1, I was still recovering from the flu. 2, it was at an hour in the morning where I should have probably have been in bed. And 3, it was more or less me with a bunch of individuals that I share similar mindsets with that then were taken far out of context. The reason I'm stating this is because the production in question is a series that tries to juggle multiple storylines at the same time, which can be good if handled properly. There are 3 plot lines that are handling themselves in multiple series that don't get misconstrued, and they end up coalescing along with one another by a good point. They end up being able to converge onto a solid conjecture about what it is being stated for the episode or the season in question. But I'm stating this of just 3. What if instead of just 3, we multiply that to 6, and then we add on more plot lines to that front to where it's very congested? And then you show that to a viewership to where the audience is trying to then dissect it, digest, and then completely get engrossed into the matter. And then without a lot of good follow-up, you're leaving more questions than answers, because it's not like you're leaving good enough breadcrumbs, because it's more misleading than it is productive. Next thing of note is when you're basically being tone deaf about how you're handling subjects when you're not in those positions of the subject. Where I'm not going to go into all the details about what happened, because if you guys will figure out those notes from there, you'll then find out the show. But all I'm going to say is it's a white director trying to write for black people's individual problems, where one of them is about sexual orientation, and then following up with it for something I'm going to address in a moment. But this is also where I'm going to be probably having a lot of people tilt their heads when I state this, but I don't think there are a lot of people that can write for other races. And I'm stating this because of how a lot of people don't seem to understand why the African American community really has a problem when it comes to when people are coming out in families that are predominantly, if not entirely, African American or African Canadian, or sometimes just African British. And I could go into the full analogy, but I also don't feel like people would get it if I said it this way, so let me put it to you like this. We all know that from various different documentaries and films that people are starting to slowly understand that to be a minority means that you always feel targeted. That's just a small, minute fraction of what it means to not be white in the world, but we're going to follow suit on that. As such, then add in the factor about what it means to be queer or in the LGBTQA plus community on top of that. I feel like if I explain it, no one is going to understand it unless you're in it. But the way I'm trying to put it with this is that the target on the backs of many people, whether you're black, Hispanic, Asian, Polynesian, Middle Eastern, Indian, Native American, what have you, it's a whole nother field when you're all of a sudden then approached to then say that you're gay for being either into men as a man or into women as a woman, or you're trans, or you're such and such and the other thing. It's not the factor of what people would automatically assume, because it's viewing it from just a person-to-person standpoint about not understanding how the generational shift is a huge problem, and how knowing people in certain generations helped shape that environment more than religion. And seeing that as a giant target is something that's more damning than anything. And that is something that I don't think a lot of writers understand, because even with me explaining this, people probably just tilting their heads just like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. You're probably over-exaggerating. And if you don't get it, then you don't really get it. And it's probably best not to write it on that front. But then we go into the counterbalance of another thing in question, which is assessing threats, but then writing it to actually mean something. Where one of the characters, a Caucasian male, that is something that is okay. That is probably a good thing because of how a lot of things visually make a lot more sense for visual cues. Now, taking that as this one person that is... But then let's talk about stuff where it's analyzing threats but not making a misconstrued notion about the dialogue or pacing. Case in point, same series. Throughout it, we just are following this regular African-American male where they're in the closet, unable to really come out, and there's some problems in the environment that's making them more agitated, but they're also feeling super vulnerable. The counterpart of that is having a Caucasian male, probably American, probably whatever, but their whole thing is power, manipulation, and deconstruction about what it is to make or break humanity in their own corner of the world. Whether it's through adult means or through very grotesque means. On a threat scale, I would be more afraid of the person that has adults in their back pocket, and probably be a lot more terrified on that front because you don't know the full circumstances about what you're going to get into for agitation. But then the writer/director wants to instead state that this guy that probably has adult means to take care of a situation is bad enough. But then to throw in this one African-American individual that just has problems that no one wants to talk about and we're probably blowing way out of proportion is more deadly. And I, a fellow Caucasian student in this school, am more terrified of that individual. And the reason I'm trying to phrase it like this isn't for people to just be like, you're reading more into this than you know. I'm stating this because I've been in that situation. I've been in those toxic environments to where people wanted to say, this one person had a knife on them, but this guy we're assuming is black seems the most deadly just because he has a backpack and has a hoodie with skulls on them. This kid has heroin in his shoes and a gun, but this guy that we're thinking just crossed the border is more deadly just because his shoes look nicer and we feel like he stole them. When you write stuff to where you don't understand how that phrasing affects people that actually live that life, but you're just trying to pass it off as like, we're going to say this throwaway line, it's not going to mean anything, who's going to feel offended? That's when you're not understanding the problem and you're trying to then project your own big blocking wall about how bad you are at your job. Do other writers I know make this mistake? We've all made mistakes like this. I've made mistakes like this. And I've tried to grow out of it after my first production. The director in question is trying to repeat this as if it were a big to-do just because they've got a lot of different fan bases, thanks to people trying to state that we're in the same community as you, so whatever you do is golden. Whatever you're trying to push and peddle, we're going to be on the same side as you, no matter what you state. And that is the biggest fucking problem. I will not apologize about me trying to state how a production can be so convoluted because of overstuffed plots that you can't even discern what to make heads or tails about because you're adding too many different elements. It's literally too many cooks in the kitchen. You want to focus on one plot line, but then there's 4 more, and then there's 3 others, and a few of them don't really commingle with one another for real payoff, because you're supposed to build off everything to where you can push forward on a positive note that doesn't feel like a step backwards for character development. You can't introduce a lot of different elements about how characters are trying to make certain moves without really trying to understand the scope. So what have we kind of learned here today? 1, don't do request reviews that make the reviewer uncomfortable. It's not a good look, because then it just kind of looks a little bad in a lot of ways. And 2, you gotta get out of your glass house and stop trying to take that whole, I'm going to take the sleazy route because that's how I move, it's how I operate, I have to be oh so squeaky clean. Because every time you do that, you will get caught. Your trail will be in the dirt. And the people that are going to try and apologize because of just how they did stuff instead of why they addressed it will finally clap back until finally that you get it in your system that this wasn't the thing to do. But hey, you guys could listen to all this, jot it down, put it on a poster note, and then be like, you know what? I could do better than these people. I can make myself feel a lot better than this by actually trying to be a better individual in what I'm trying to produce, whether it's for music, whether it's for a musical, whether it's for a TV film, whether it's for an actual TV series, silver screen stuff, indie stuff, whatever, and actually do better. Or you can literally sit around, type up stuff, keep clacking like anything that you're gonna state is gonna be the ultimate thing to a guy that has no face and has literally so many more things on his plate that the only reason I did this was to just clear the air. Not that it was worth my time just to clear the air, because this was starting to pile up and I have no time for more baggage. But either way, it's just my opinion. And probably everyone's going to try and overanalyze this to be like it's me clout chasing. But if I was clout chasing, I would have dropped the name.